I'm Morgan Chen, 42 years old. And last Thanksgiving, my entire family discovered that our matriarch's $12 million estate had been secretly transferred to my youngest sibling, the one who hadn't visited her in 3 years. The revelation came during what was supposed to be a routine family meeting at my grandmother Eleanor's Victorian mansion in Pacific Heights, San Francisco. Instead, it became the moment I realized that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. And sometimes the people you trust most are planning your downfall while smiling at your face. My grandmother Eleanor Chen, 92 years old and once the sharpest mind in any boardroom, now resided at Golden Gate Senior Care, barely recognizing her own reflection. Yet somehow, according to the documents my sister Casey proudly waved that November afternoon, grandmother had signed over everything just 3 weeks earlier: the mansion, the investment portfolio, the art collection, even the family's stake in Chen Hospitality Group. $12 million in assets, accumulated over 7 decades of careful investment and sacrifice, supposedly gifted to the one grandchild who couldn't even remember grandmother's birthday without Facebook reminders. The mahogany-paneled study where we gathered still smelled of grandmother's favorite jasmine tea, though she hadn't been able to visit in 8 months. My parents, Robert and Linda Chen, sat on the vintage leather sofa, looking oddly unsurprised. My brother Jordan, the family's supposed neutral party with his law degree from Berkeley, stood by the window, clutching a manila folder like a life preserver. And there was Casey, my 35-year-old sister, dressed in a designer suit I'd never seen before, her fresh manicure glinting as she held those papers with barely contained triumph. Comment where you're watching from, what time it is, and whether you've ever felt betrayed by family. Hit like so more people hear this story. Before that day, I thought I knew my family's dynamics perfectly. As the eldest, I'd spent 15 years as grandmother Eleanor's primary caregiver after my divorce, moving back from New York with my 2 children to ensure she could age with dignity in the home she'd built with grandfather Chen before his passing. I managed her medications, drove her to countless doctor appointments, and spent every Sunday afternoon reading to her from her favorite Chinese poetry collections. Even after dementia began stealing her memories one by one, Casey, meanwhile, had built her life 3,000 miles away in Miami, cultivating her image as a lifestyle influencer with 200,000 followers who believed her carefully curated story of success. She posted inspirational quotes about family values while skipping every major holiday, claiming work obligations that mysteriously always involved beach resorts or yacht parties. The last time she'd actually seen grandmother in person was Christmas 2019. And even then, she'd spent most of the visit taking selfies in the mansion for her Instagram content. The papers are completely legal, Casey announced, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she'd perfected for her social media videos. Grandmother wanted someone who understood modern business to handle the estate. Someone with vision. She glanced at me with barely concealed disdain. Not someone stuck in the past, playing nurse instead of building an empire. The irony cut deep. My medical technology startup, which I'd built while caring for grandmother, had just secured Series B funding of $8 million. But in Casey's narrative, success only counted if it came with blue checkmarks and sponsored posts. Jordan shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking up in his measured lawyer voice. Casey, these documents. The timing is concerning. Grandmother's medical records show she was diagnosed with stage 4 dementia in January. How could she legally consent to this transfer 3 weeks ago? Casey's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. Are you really questioning grandmother's mental capacity? How dare you? She had a moment of clarity. The doctors confirmed it. She knew exactly what she was doing. She turned to our parents. "Tell them. You were there." My father Robert cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. "Your grandmother did seem lucid that day. She recognized Casey immediately." My mother Linda nodded quickly, her hand fidgeting with her pearl necklace, the same tell she'd had since we were children, appearing whenever she lied about who broke the vase or ate the last mooncake. That's when I noticed the Bentley key fob Casey had casually placed on the antique desk. The car I'd seen in the driveway. Pristine white with custom plates reading "Blessed." The same car she'd posted about on Instagram just yesterday with the caption, "Sometimes the universe rewards those who dare to dream." The timing wasn't coincidental, it was calculated. "You've been planning this," I said quietly, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. "This isn't about grandmother's wishes. This is about your debts. Isn't it? The failed jewelry line. The lawsuit from your former business partner. The Miami penthouse you're about to lose." Casey's face flushed crimson, but she recovered quickly, hair influencer training and damage control kicking in. "My financial situation has nothing to do with this. Grandmother chose me because she saw my potential. My understanding of modern wealth creation. Not everyone can be satisfied with small victories." The dismissal of my years of sacrifice stung. But it was the revision of history that truly amazed me. To understand the depth of Casey's deception, you need to know how our family arrived at this moment. How decades of subtle favoritism and willful blindness created the perfect storm for this betrayal. Our grandmother, Eleanor Chen, built her fortune from nothing. She arrived in San Francisco in 1968 with $37 and a nursing degree from Hong Kong. While grandfather Chen worked double shifts at the shipyard, she saved every penny from her hospital job until they could buy their first rental property in Chinatown. By the time I was born, they owned 43 properties across the Bay Area and had founded Chen Hospitality Group, managing 16 boutique hotels. I came to live with them when I was 12. After my parents' first divorce turned ugly, the custody battle had drained their savings and patience, leaving me feeling like a burden they passed between households. Grandmother Eleanor opened her arms without question, converting the third-floor suite into my personal haven. Those years in her care shaped everything I would become: her discipline, her strategic mind, her belief that wealth meant nothing without wisdom. Casey arrived 7 years later. The miracle baby from my parents' reconciliation. The story they told was beautiful: love conquered all. Second chances bloomed into new life. The family welcomed her like royalty returning from exile. Every milestone became a production. Professional photographers for her first steps, a string quartet for her 3rd birthday, a custom-designed playhouse that cost more than most people's cars. Jordan fell somewhere in between. Born during my parents' good years but old enough to remember the bad ones. He learned early to navigate the middle ground, never taking sides, never making waves. His superpower was invisibility, and he wielded it through law school and beyond, becoming the family's unofficial mediator while carefully avoiding any real involvement. The favoritism toward Casey wasn't subtle. While I worked 3 jobs to pay for my pre-med courses, Casey received a fully funded art history degree from USC. When I started my first business at 28, a home healthcare service inspired by grandmother's teachings, my parents invested nothing, citing market uncertainty. When Casey launched her first venture at 23, a luxury candle line with no business plan, they provided $100,000 without blinking. She needs our support to find herself. My mother would say whenever I questioned the disparity, "You've always been so capable." Morgan. Casey requires more guidance. That guidance apparently included bailing her out of 6 failed businesses by age 35. The candle company burned through startup funds in 8 months. The boutique fitness studio closed after a sexual harassment lawsuit from an instructor Casey had hired without background checks. The sustainable fashion line collapsed when investigators discovered the clothes were made in sweatshops. Each failure was reframed as a learning experience. Each loss absorbed by the family without consequence. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life in the shadow of their indifference. After my ex-husband left for his 23-year-old assistant, taking half our assets despite contributing nothing to our marriage, I returned to San Francisco with my children, Emma and Lucas. Grandmother Eleanor welcomed us immediately, insisting we take the pool house while I reestablished myself. Those were the hardest years, but also the most meaningful. Every morning at 5, I would check on grandmother before the kids woke up. We developed a routine: green tea and Chinese newspapers, discussing business strategies while her mind remained sharp. She taught me about compound interest and calculated risks, about reading contracts and recognizing snakes in suits. When dementia began its cruel theft, starting with recent memories and working backward through decades, I adjusted our routine, but never abandoned it. "You remind me of myself," she told me during one of her last fully lucid days in 2021. "Not in the struggle, that was different for our generations, but in the spirit. You build things that matter. You understand that money is a tool, not a goal." Casey visited exactly 4 times during grandmother's decline. Each visit was documented extensively on social media, touching photos of her holding grandmother's hand for exactly as long as it took to capture the shot. Heartfelt captions about the importance of family written by her assistant, and strategic tags, ensuring maximum engagement. She monetized our grandmother's illness through sponsored posts about self-care during family crises, partnering with brands selling everything from meditation apps to luxury grief journals. The first crack in Casey's carefully constructed facade appeared when Jordan finally opened the manila folder he'd been clutching. "I've been doing some research," he said quietly, his lawyer's instinct for documentation finally serving a purpose. "Casey, you visited Golden Gate Senior Care exactly 3 times in the past year. Security logs don't lie. Yet somehow, you convinced grandmother to sign over everything during a mysterious 4th visit that happened outside normal visiting hours." Casey's influencer's smile faltered for just a moment. "The facility made special arrangements. Grandmother requested to see me specifically. At 2 in the morning I asked, remembering the timestamp I'd noticed on the transfer documents. Grandmother hasn't been awake past 8 o'clock in 2 years. Her sundowning makes evening visits impossible. Every nurse there knows this." My mother interrupted, her voice sharp with manufactured indignation. "Morgan, stop attacking your sister. Jealousy is such an ugly emotion. Just because grandmother finally recognized Casey's potential doesn't mean you should tear the family apart." The gaslighting was so predictable it was almost boring. But what came next was not. Jordan pulled out his phone and connected it to the smart television grandmother had installed but never learned to use. "I have something everyone needs to see," he said, his hands trembling slightly. "I requested security footage from the facility through a contact. What I found changes everything." The grainy video showed the facility's reception area at 1:53 in the morning. 3 weeks ago, Casey entered with a man in an expensive suit. Definitely not anyone from our family. They signed in using the emergency contact override, a provision meant for end-of-life situations. The timestamp jumped to 2:14. Casey and the stranger were in grandmother's room. She was propped up in bed, clearly disoriented, her hands being guided to sign document after document. "That's Marcus Webb," Jordan said quietly. "He runs a company called Elder Care Solutions. They specialize in what they call estate optimization for aging adults. They've been sued 17 times in the past 3 years for fraudulent transfers and undue influence." The room erupted. My father slammed his fist on the antique desk, making everyone jump. "Jordan, how dare you spy on your sister? Family business stays in the family." But his anger felt performed, lacking the genuine outrage of a father discovering his daughter's deception. My mother's reaction was even more telling. She simply closed her eyes and sighed, like someone watching a predictable movie ending. Casey's mask finally slipped completely. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she hissed, her curated composure crumbling. $3 million in debt. $3 million. My investors are threatening legal action. The IRS is investigating my tax returns. I could lose everything. Go to prison even. Grandmother would want me to have the money. She always said family helps family. Family helps. Family. I repeated slowly, tasting the bitter irony. Like when I asked for a $10,000 loan to keep my healthcare startup afloat during COVID. And you told your followers I was toxic for mixing family and money. Or when Lucas needed surgery for his broken leg. And you sent a get well card with a discount code for your wellness course. But the real revelation came when Jordan pulled up Casey's Instagram from that night. Posted at 2:47 in the morning. Clearly scheduled in advance. Was a photo of her at a Miami charity gala with the caption, "Blessed to support Alzheimer's research tonight." My grandmother's journey reminds me daily that our memories are our greatest treasure. She had created an alibi while simultaneously robbing a woman whose memories had already been stolen by disease. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. But Jordan wasn't finished. He produced another document. This one from the California Department of Public Health. "I filed an elder abuse report yesterday. The investigation is already underway. They take financial exploitation of vulnerable adults very seriously here. Federal charges are possible." Casey's face went white. "You wouldn't dare. I'm your sister." Jordan's expression was stone. "You stopped being my sister the moment you decided grandmother was just another mark for your con." My father stood abruptly, his businessman facade cracking. "Everyone calm down. We can handle this privately. No need for authorities." He looked directly at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not quite fear, but something close. "Morgan, you don't want to destroy your sister's life over money. Think about what grandmother would really want." That's when I realized the truth that had been staring at me all along. My parents knew. They had known from the beginning. Casey's desperation. The midnight visit. The fraudulent transfer, none of it was a surprise to them. The only shock was that Jordan and I had discovered it. The silence that followed my realization was deafening. I looked at my parents. Really looked at them for the first time in years. My father's imported Italian suit. My mother's fresh surgical adjustments that she claimed were just good skincare. Casey's sudden ability to afford a Bentley. The money had been flowing long before this final $12 million grab. "How much did Casey promise you?" I asked quietly. My father's jaw tightened. But my mother answered with her typical deflection. "I don't know what you're implying. Morgan. We're comfortable with our restaurant income." Jordan laughed bitterly. "The restaurants that have been operating at a loss for 3 years, I've seen the tax returns. Mom. You're underwater by at least $2 million. The only reason you're not bankrupt is because someone's been making mysterious deposits into your accounts." Should we guess who? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in grandmother's study in the pool house, surrounded by her business journals and photo albums, trying to process the scope of the betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your sister isn't the mastermind you think she is. Meet me at Bistro Claudine tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Patricia Wong. Dr. Patricia Wong had been grandmother's physician and closest friend for 30 years. If anyone knew the truth about grandmother's condition and intentions, it would be her. The next morning, I told everyone I needed space to process and drove to the small French cafe in Nob Hill where grandmother used to take me for special occasions. Patricia was already waiting, looking elegant, despite her 70 years. Her silver hair pulled back in the same chignon she'd worn since I was a child. Morgan, she said, pulling me into a warm embrace. I'm so sorry about what's happening. Your grandmother would be horrified. She handed me a USB drive wrapped in tissue paper. Eleanor knew something like this might happen. 3 months before her diagnosis became severe. She asked me to keep this safe. She made me promise to give it to you if anyone tried to manipulate her estate while she was vulnerable. My hands shook as I pocketed the drive. Patricia continue. There's a video on there, recorded in my office with a psychiatric evaluation done the same day to establish competency. She knew her mind was starting to slip, so she wanted to make her wishes crystal clear while she still could. Why didn't she just update her will then, I asked. Patricia's expression darkened. She tried. Your father intercepted the estate attorney 3 times, claiming Eleanor was already showing signs of confusion. He convinced her to wait. Said he would handle everything when the time was right. Eleanor knew then that something was wrong. She pulled out a folder of medical records. I've documented every visit, every evaluation. In January, when Eleanor was diagnosed with stage 4 dementia, she could barely remember her own name. The idea that she had a moment of clarity 3 weeks ago is medically impossible. I'll testify to that in court if needed. That afternoon, I contacted Samantha Liu, the best elder law attorney in the Bay Area. She specialized in financial exploitation cases and had a reputation for being ruthless when protecting vulnerable seniors. After reviewing the evidence for just an hour, she looked at me with fire in her eyes. This is one of the clearest cases of elder abuse I've seen, she said. The security footage alone would likely result in criminal charges, combined with Dr. Wong's testimony and whatever is on that USB drive. We're looking at potential federal wire fraud charges if any money crossed state lines. While Samantha began preparing the legal case, I received unexpected support from Rosa Martinez, the night nurse at Golden Gate Senior Care. She called me crying, saying she'd been carrying guilt for weeks. I knew something was wrong when your sister showed up that night, she said. Your grandmother was heavily sedated for anxiety. She couldn't have consented to anything. I wrote everything in my personal notes because the official chart was altered the next day. Even our neighbor, George Tanaka, reached out. The 85-year-old retired judge had witnessed something disturbing 6 months ago. I saw your sister screaming at Eleanor in the garden, he told me over tea. She was demanding Eleanor sign something, saying she deserved compensation for having to pretend to care. Your grandmother was crying, begging Casey to leave. I intervened and Casey stormed off. But I took photos of the documents she left behind. The documents were drafts of the transfer papers, dated months before the official signing. Casey had been planning this for at least half a year, waiting for the perfect moment when grandmother was vulnerable enough to exploit but not so far gone that the transfer would be immediately questioned. As the evidence mounted, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't just fight for the estate, I would expose the entire conspiracy and ensure nobody could ever do this to another vulnerable elder again. The USB drive contained more than just a video. As I sat in Samantha Lou's office with Jordan beside me, we discovered grandmother Eleanor had been documenting everything for years. Folders labeled with dates going back to 2019 contained financial records, emails, and most shockingly, audio recordings of family conversations she'd secretly captured. Play the video first, Samantha advised. We need to see her established intent. Grandmother's face filled the screen, clear-eyed and composed, despite the slight tremor in her hands. The date stamp showed March 15, 2021. Dr. Patricia Wong sat beside her, with another man I recognized as Dr. James Chen, the chief of psychiatry at UCSF Medical Center. My name is Eleanor Minghua Chen, grandmother began, her voice steady and deliberate. I am recording this video to establish my testamentary intentions while I am of sound mind. As verified by 2 independent psychiatric evaluations conducted today, I have recently been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. And I want to ensure my wishes are followed when I can no longer advocate for myself. She looked directly at the camera. My estate, valued at approximately $12 million, is to be divided into 3 equal parts among my grandchildren. With one crucial exception. Casey Chen is to receive a maximum of $500,000, regardless of the estate's total value. This is not done from spite, but from knowledge of her character and concerns about her financial irresponsibility. The next part made my blood run cold. I have discovered that my son Robert and daughter-in-law Linda have been systematically stealing from my accounts for the past 4 years, using Casey as their intermediary. They believe I haven't noticed the missing funds because of my declining memory. But I've documented every transaction. She held up a ledger, her handwriting still precise. $3.7 million has been diverted to Casey's various failed businesses, which were actually shell companies funneling money to Robert's gambling debts and Linda's secret real estate investments in Nevada. The paper trail is extensive and has been provided to my attorney, to be released if anyone contests this will or attempts to manipulate my estate while I'm incapacitated. Jordan grabbed my hand. Neither of us had suspected our parents' involvement went this deep. But grandmother wasn't finished. There's something else my family doesn't know. Casey is not Robert's biological daughter. The room seemed to tilt. On screen, grandmother continued with devastating calm. Linda had an affair with her business partner, Thomas Mitchell. In 1987, Casey is his child. Robert has known since Casey was 15. When she needed a kidney transplant and family testing revealed the truth. This is why he's allowed her to manipulate him. She's been blackmailing him with the threat of exposing this secret. Suddenly, Casey's favored status made horrible sense. Not love, but levrage. Not favoritism, but fear. The video continued for another 20 minutes, detailing every financial crime, every forged document, every betrayal. Grandmother had hired a forensic accountant in 2020 to trace the money. And the evidence was damning. Casey's Instagram lifestyle wasn't funded by brand deals but by systematic theft from a woman she claimed to love. There's more, Samantha said, opening another file. Your grandmother set up a trust in 2019, before the worst of her symptoms. It's ironclad and supersedes any power of attorney or documentation signed after her diagnosis. The $12 million transfer to Casey is legally void. That evening, we called an emergency family meeting at the mansion. Casey arrived in her Bentley, confident and dismissive. My parents came separately. their united front finally cracking. None of them knew what we'd discovered. I connected my laptop to the television and played grandmother's video without preamble. The color drained from Casey's face when grandmother mentioned the $500,000 limit. My mother gasped at the revelation of the stolen millions. But it was my father's reaction to Casey's parentage that was most telling, not surprise. But relief that the secret was finally out. "This is fake," Casey stammered when the video ended. "Deepfake technology. Anyone can make these now." Grandmother was confused. Manipulated by Morgan, who wanted everything for herself. The forensic accountant disagrees. Jordan said, producing a stack of bank statements. "Every transaction grandmother documented has been verified. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is particularly interested in the wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands." My mother finally broke her silence. "Robert, you promised me the gambling was under control. You said the money was from your investments." She turned to Casey with venom. "And you ungrateful parasite. We gave you everything. And you've been bleeding us dry while playing the victim." The revelation that Casey had been blackmailing my father with his knowledge of her parentage was the final blow to their conspiracy. They turned on each other spectacularly. "You knew." Casey screamed at my father. "You knew I wasn't yours, and you used it against me my whole life. Every time you gave me money. Every time you sided with me. It was just to keep me quiet about Mom's affair." My father's composure finally shattered completely. "You were bleeding me dry. 400,000 for the candle business. 600,000 for the fitness studio. 800,000 last year alone. You threatened to post everything on social media. To destroy the family reputation. I had no choice." "The family reputation," I laughed. "But there was no humor in it. You stole millions from your own mother while she was losing her mind. And you're worried about reputation." Casey turned to my mother. Mascara streaming down her face. "You told me I was special. That I deserved everything. You said Morgan was jealous. That Jordan was weak. You made me believe I was the only one who mattered." Linda stood slowly, her perfect posture crumbling. "You were my reminder of the biggest mistake of my life. Every time I looked at you, I saw Thomas. Saw my weakness. So yes, I gave you everything to ease my guilt. But you became a monster. Casey, you took advantage of an old woman who loved you despite knowing you weren't really her granddaughter." The truth was even more complex. Grandmother Eleanor had known about Casey's parentage all along. She'd paid for a private investigator in 2005 when she noticed Casey looked nothing like our family. But instead of exposing the truth, she'd chosen to love Casey equally, hoping nurture could overcome nature. Samantha Lou cleared her throat. "Bringing us back to legal reality. The criminal charges are moving forward. Casey, you're looking at 15 to 20 years for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Robert and Linda, you're facing 5 to 10 as accomplices. You have 48 hours to surrender to authorities, or arrests will be made publicly." Casey made one last desperate play. "Morgan, please. We're still family. Grandmother wouldn't want this. She always said forgiveness was the highest virtue." I pulled out the final document from grandmother's files. A letter addressed to me dated just 1 week before her diagnosis. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. "My dearest Morgan, if you're reading this, then my fears have come true. The family has chosen greed over love. Do not mistake my silence for ignorance. I see Casey's manipulations, Robert's weakness, Linda's deception. I stayed quiet to preserve peace. But I was wrong. Silence unraveled. You must be the strength I failed to be. Protect what I built. Not for the money, but for the principle. Some things are unforgivable. And that's okay. Justice is also a form of love. 3 days later, the arrests made front-page news in the Chronicle. Casey's Instagram followers watched her perp walk in real time as someone live-streamed from the courthouse. The comments were brutal but not undeserved. Her final post, made an hour before her arrest, was a quote, "The universe gives us exactly what we deserve." The irony was lost on her, but not on the 30,000 people who shared it mockingly. My parents' restaurant empire collapsed within a month. Their business partners, learning about the embezzlement, pulled out immediately. The properties were seized to pay back stolen funds. They divorced while out on bail, each blaming the other for their downfall. My mother moved in with her sister in Seattle. My father disappeared somewhere in Mexico, violating his bail conditions and becoming a fugitive. Casey was sentenced to 12 years, eligible for parole in 7 with good behavior. During the sentencing, she gave a tearful speech about being manipulated by our parents, claiming she was a victim too. The judge, a stern woman who'd seen every manipulation tactic, responded simply, "Miss Chen, you had choices. You chose cruelty." Jordan and I used the recovered funds to establish the Eleanor Chen Foundation for Elder Protection, providing free legal services to seniors facing financial exploitation. Rosa Martinez became our first program director. Dr. Patricia Wong joined the board. Even George Tanaka, our elderly neighbor, became an advocate, sharing his testimony at community centers. The mansion was sold to a family with young children who filled it with laughter instead of lies. Jordan and I purchased modest homes near each other, close to grandmother's care facility. We visit her every Sunday, even though she no longer recognizes us. Sometimes, in rare moments, she smiles and calls me by my mother's name. I don't correct her. At least that relationship, in her mind, remains untainted. My children, Emma and Lucas, now teenagers, learned the hardest lesson of all through this: that family isn't about blood or obligation, but about choices. They saw their aunt choose greed, their grandparents choose deception, but they also saw their Uncle Jordan choose courage and their great-grandmother choose love, even when betrayed. If you've ever witnessed or experienced family betrayal over inheritance, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories that families don't want you to hear. Remember, the truth always finds its way to light.